In the early 1990s, two of the world's most populous nations, China and India, embarked on transformative journeys, opening up to the global economy after decades of isolation. Despite similar goals, China's economy today is considerably larger, with per capita income more than double that of India's when adjusted for purchasing power. This economic disparity isn't merely a result of policy differences, it's rooted in a complex interplay of historical choices, demographic shifts, and education systems. Why then has China surged so far ahead? Let's examine three crucial areas: economic strategy, education, and demographics. China and India approached globalization with contrasting visions. China, under the guidance of the Communist Party, set its sights on becoming the world's factory, starting with low-cost goods like toys and electronics before advancing to high-tech sectors like semiconductors and electric vehicles. This strategy relied on building a strong manufacturing base and infrastructure, creating millions of jobs and drawing in foreign investment. India, on the other hand, leaned into services, focusing on sectors like information technology and software. While this positioned India as a tech hub and a key player in the global IT industry, it created fewer opportunities for the manufacturing sector to absorb labor, especially for those moving out of agriculture. As a result, India's economic model has produced a skilled but limited workforce in urban areas, leaving a substantial portion of its population underemployed. This contrast is evident in global export data. China accounts for nearly a third of global manufacturing output, while India's export strength remains primarily in services. India's reliance on a few high-value service industries means that its growth is less broad-based, whereas China's diversified industrial economy has a stronger impact across all income levels. A critical, often overlooked factor in the China-India economic divide is education. The Paris School of Economics World Inequality Lab, through research by Nitin Kumar Bhati and Li Yang, sheds light on how differing educational systems have influenced workforce productivity and growth in both countries. Historically, India had a head start in Western-style education, largely due to British colonial influence. However, India's educational system emphasized creating clerks and administrators rather than vocational or technical skills, a legacy that still affects its workforce composition today. After independence, India invested heavily in tertiary education, building prestigious institutions that trained generations of scientists and engineers. However, basic literacy and primary education remained underdeveloped, limiting overall literacy and economic inclusivity. China's educational strategy, on the other hand, focused on widespread literacy and vocational training from the outset. After abolishing the Confucian imperial exam system in 1905, China worked to create a more practical education model. Even during politically tumultuous periods like the Cultural Revolution, China prioritized expanding primary and secondary education. By 2020, China was enrolling a much higher percentage of its university-age population in tertiary institutions than India. This approach created a large base of skilled, vocationally trained workers who could drive rapid industrial growth, particularly in manufacturing. China's one-child policy, implemented in 1979, created a youth bulge that propelled its economy through the early 2000s, providing an ample labor force at a critical time in its development. Today, however, China faces the downside of that policy: a rapidly aging population and a shrinking workforce, which could challenge its economic growth in the coming decades. India, by contrast, is just beginning to experience its demographic dividend. With a median age of 28, India is one of the youngest countries globally, and its labor force is expected to keep growing for the foreseeable future. But while this young population presents an opportunity, it also highlights a challenge. India needs to create millions of new jobs annually to harness this demographic advantage. Without sufficient job creation, particularly in sectors outside of agriculture, India's young workforce may not fulfill its potential. As China and India pursue their distinct paths, the world is watching closely, and not just as passive observers. With both nations vying for influence, their trajectories are creating ripple effects that are reshaping geopolitics, technology, and even climate initiatives. China's dominance in manufacturing and India's rising prowess in digital services are setting up a fascinating global tug-of-war, where alliances, trade dependencies, and technology races all play pivotal roles. Imagine a future where India's tech expertise and China's manufacturing might converge or clash on the global stage. With both countries investing in artificial intelligence, green energy, and infrastructure projects abroad, their competition could define the 21st century as much as the US-Soviet rivalry defined the 20th. And for countries caught in the middle, from Southeast Asia to Africa, this rivalry opens doors for new partnerships, new growth models, and even new risks. So the question isn't just whether China or India will ultimately prevail in their economic race. It's how their competition will reshape the entire world, pushing every nation to make choices that will reverberate for generations. The outcome isn't just an economic footnote, it's the unfolding story of our global future.